Hello, and welcome to tonight's episode of Myths and Stories. Tonight we are continuing our series on the Awoken, the series that never ends, it seems. But we're here for it. We're having a fun time. And say tonight we are going to be discussing the events leading up to and maybe immediately after one of the main conflicts of the Taken War. For anyone that played in D1 and is familiar with the Taken King expansion, some of this is going to sound a little familiar, but hopefully you'll learn some things you didn't know beforehand. So to do a little recap on where we were with our last episode, we talked about the Oracle engine. We talked about Aldrin primarily. It was Aldrin and Julian and their adventures within the Black Garden and surviving it, coming out of it, how it changed them, what it did to them, and how different Aldrin came out of that experience being. And then we talked about the creation of the Oracle engine within the Dreaming City, quite literally at the handiwork of Keldawaj, and what we are suspecting are the Nine. So, with all of that in mind, all of these great adventures the Awoken have already gone on, and that Mara has already put into action in one way or another, and the war they've already fought with the Fallen at this point, and Aldrin braving the Black Garden. Our very first reading tonight is actually going to be a little bit of a flashback, and it's written that way in game even. So the one we're starting with tonight is titled Tyrannicide, Part 1, from the book The Awoken of the Reef. And this one goes like this. Mara's death began in this mark. Later would come Eris Morn, Osiris, Toland, and all the other accessories of the majestic suicide. Later would come the reef's tentative entanglements with Vex and Cabal, Fallen and Hive, and the fateful decision to intervene when the House of Wolves turned earthward to conquer the last human city. Later, there would be stories here untold, the Ahamkara and the subcreation of the Dreaming City, the Shatterstone fury of the Reef Wars, Brother Aldrin's journey into that fell garden, and great sweeping plots whose beginnings and consequences have been entirely expunged for the sake of elegance. Here is where the beginning began. At that moment, when Mara bolted awake from the dream, her circle of Techians lay with her in the misty winter-cold chamber, and they came back groggily, their augments stuttering with resync. She had dreamt a thought of absolute simplicity and perfection, and the thought had become a tooth and had bitten her. It had left a wound shaped like an X. Mara seized a pane of crystal paper, flashed it rigid and receptive with a touch, and wrote, I dreamt of a sword and a bomb. I dreamt of the self-honing blade that has cut itself so fine it pierces the world and thus becomes the world. It is self-honing because it constantly whets itself against itself. I dreamt of death bearing this blade, or of something so closely allied with death as to be its synonym, so that to separate them would require a knife sharper than sharpness. Death raised up that blade and said, I cut all, and all I cut. Ayat. When death cut the bomb, and the bomb was broken and could not fire, I was the bomb. I knew that death was the cut verb, and that its only verb was to cut. Shapes and gliders, I dreamt of existence as a game of cellular automata. In this metaphor, there were only two things: shapes in the game world and the rules of the game world. The rules were the rules of life and death. I understood that the sword was the desire to escape existence as a shape in the game, and to become the rule that made the shapes. This rule said only, live or die. It had no other outputs. It could not keep secrets. Against it was the desire to become a shape so complex that it could, within itself, play other games. What will soon be? I dreamt that the sword that was death and rule sought out complexity and cut it to reveal the simplicity within. I knew that soon we would be cut, for we were complex and full of secrets. I knew that it was coming. I knew that the stroke would fall and that I had to stop it. How can a bomb make use of a sword? How can the rule that separates life from death be killed? I must go to the dreaming city and use the oracle engine, Mara told her Techians. Prepare my ship. So that's the end of that chapter. And we're going to pause because there's a lot of explanation there.
There really is. There's a lot of metaphor being thrown out here, but there's a lot of like, once you have a better understanding of the lore in general, you kind of see what's going on here. So obviously the first like whole half of this is just this is kind of like a quick blip. I mean, it's literally everything we've covered. Talks about entanglements with Vex and Cabal and Fallen and Hive and the Reef. When they first get back, the House of Wolves turning earthward to the last city and them shutting them down. The Ahamkara being discovered, the Dreaming City being formed, the Reef Fort, like all of this journey, Uldren's journey into the garden. Everything that we've covered is in that first paragraph, which kind of makes me laugh because like where you talk about how like this is like the never-ending story. Being the story of the Awoken, and Mara just summed it up in like, I don't know, 10 sentences or less. And I'm like, Mara, come on, man, we got to create content here. So yeah, but yeah, and then so she wakes from this dream, and she keeps talking about this sword, the sword and the bomb. So to me, this is the two logics of the world, like the sword being sword logic and bomb being bomb logic. The most sword logic being the most simplistic thing, and we've talked about that a bunch throughout our entire coverage of the Books of Sorrow and the Hive, so we kind of know where that comes from. And then the bomb logic, which is to be the opposite of that, to be the most complex thing. But then it just goes crazy throughout here.
Yeah, so the beginning of this, talking about that summary of what we've already talked about, it's essentially setting up that this scene that they're talking about happened before most of the events we have discussed up till this point. Like obviously they were in the Sol system, but this is all before the House of Wolves, before Mara has met any of the other people from Sol System, Eris and Osiris and Toland and whatnot, because it's saying later those things will happen. But this moment was the beginning of the events that we see unfold, both in the lore and in one of the cinematics during the Taken King. So Mara, I dreamt of the sword and the bomb, absolutely the two logics. There's the sword logic, which, like you said, we've discussed at length in the Books of Sorrow. Essentially, the survival of the fittest on a cosmic scale. Whatever is supposed to exist will prove that it can and should exist by killing everything else. That's it. Yep. The logic of the bomb being kind of Mara's own invention. I definitely
see it.
It's the thought that, well, she's the first one I recall ever mentioning it in the lore.
She might be the only one that ever talks about it. So
Maybe
I
so.
absolutely think that she is the inventor of bomb logic, and only because of this series of events here, right? Like only because of this dream is she the inventor of bomb logic, and only because she sees the sword logic and tries to figure out, well, what do I do against this? And I think that's where she comes up with that idea of bomb
Yeah,
logic.
and her kind of idea of what bomb logic is, you know, whereas sword is simplicity, cutting things away until you get to the simplest thing, which is essentially like, do you exist or do you not exist? Uh, the bomb is the opposite. It is complexity. It is maybe one individual piece on its own isn't strong or can't prove itself, but when that piece is put into part of this bigger mechanism, that mechanism is, you know, strong enough to hold its own against the sword, to usurp the sword. And it's essentially the idea, I think, what she's getting at here is with the shapes and gliders bit, is you have the world of kill or be killed, or you have the world of creating cities and societies and relationships that are not reliant on kill or be killed, that can have their own intricacies, and then when combined all together, they make this one intricate bomb that will be stronger than that kill or be killed desire.
Yeah, I it's interesting too because when I was listening to you read that and even reading back over it here, it it she says, I dreamt of an existence as a game of cellular automata. In this metaphor, there are only two things: shapes in the game world and the rules of the game world. I mean, to me, that's like she's dreaming of the garden, right?
I think you take that a couple ways. It could absolutely be the garden. If we take it at a more like philosophical look, uh she may be doing a little bit of fourth wall breaking here. Like we've seen the Ahamkara do.
Oh,
Uh you know, the game exists of shapes, pixels, and the rules of the world, whatever the engine is for that. Uh,
that's
so we
cute.
could, yeah,
That's
we could
cute.
see it that way. You could also say that the shape of our world, you know, everyone is just everything is just a bunch of, you know, tiny vibrating atoms, and like
Yeah.
technically, you know, when you look at yourself or look at somebody else, it's just in a shape, an interpretation of that particular combination of tiny vibrating atoms and the rules, physics of the universe they're in. So you could take it that way too. She's being very, you know, philosophical about it, perhaps.
I was going to say there's not a little there's not a lot of like hard sentences here. The only hard definitive things is what she refers to as death, bearing a blade, and this thing that she thinks of as death or being so closely allied with death as to be its synonym, says to her, I cut all, and all I cut, I ought. And that is straight up Hive.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, I ought. That's like high. That we talked about that in the book Star too, where I ought is like this word that's I think of it as like the Roman, like let it be written, so let it be written, so
Mm-hmm.
let it be done.
Yep.
Is the way I look at
Yeah.
that. Um, and that's very much the Hive. That's Hive.
And not only is it Hive, but very much like the sword that was death and rule, is she's referring, whether she knows it or not, she's referring to Oryx in this case.
I was going to ask, is this a reference to Oryx himself, or is this a reference to Crota?
No, this is definitely a reference to Oryx.
Okay, and Willbreaker,
Right.
right? That's his.
That's
That's his sword.
his sword, and the reason I say that is because while Crota was, you know, accomplished as a purveyor of massacre. He doesn't hold a candle to Oryx. And if we're talking about someone that is synonymous with death, Oryx, and I suppose Shivu, perhaps, have been conquering and destroying civilizations for millennia at this point.
Yeah.
Might be an overstatement, but I feel like you could be pretty confident in saying Oryx has killed the most things in the universe, period.
I'd say that's a pretty accurate statement. I mean, because when we talked about his timeline, like by the time he gets to Soul System, that's 1 billion years.
Yeah.
Like, and that's not like an exaggeration or anything. It says in the lore, it has been I've traveled the universe for 1 billion years. So yeah, it's like, yeah. And then the other hard thing here, or concrete thing, I guess, is where was it? What will soon be, I dreamt that the sword that was death and rule sought out complexity and cut it to reveal the simplicity within. That to me is very much like she sees death coming. She sees Oryx coming, which is why she kind of is in a panic now to get to the Oracle engine and ask these two questions. And these two questions, I think, are going to kind of be the center of our entire talk tonight. How can a bomb make use of a sword? And how can the rule that separates life from death be killed?
So this is absolutely a premonition. This is absolutely a similar to Sheer. I think Mara has seen the vision of her own death at the hands of.
I think so too.
This sword, at the hands of Oryx. And so she's trying to figure out how do I use this to my advantage. She knows about something that's coming, and now her thought process is not necessarily how do I stop this, but it's how do I make sure that this plays out to my benefit.
That's always been her thing, is like, how can I use this situation? Like, even if it's a bad situation or a losing situation, how can I use this situation in a way that will benefit me at some point in time?
So she tells her Techians, who apparently were all sleeping in the same room, and I guess that's a little unclear. I don't necessarily think this is just a dream that Mara had.
I think
she was perhaps doing some sort of ritual with her Techians specifically to peer into the future, maybe.
I think so.
At least that's the vibe I get.
Because it says it says that they wake groggily, like.
Yeah, her circle of Techians lay within the vision I get is her on a platform, and the Techians literally circled around in a ritual kind of way. Is at least the mental picture it paints for me.
Yeah.
But yeah. So she decides the very next thing she needs to do, though, is I need to go to the Dreaming City, and I need to use the Oracle engine, which we talked about in the previous episode. Is a device used to kind of divine situations and learn secrets about things. As well, we've seen it used in a lot of ways: communication, transportation, and now, true to its name, prophecy.
Yeah.
So we come to Tyrannicide Part 2 in the Awoken of the Reef book, where we see what happens when she asks these questions of the Oracle engine. And it goes like this. 10 times and once more, Mara asked the Oracle engine to show her the sword that was death and the way it would appear. 10 times and once more, the Oracle engine showed Mara an image of her family. First, it showed her Shir-Ido, laughing and bright with strength, who would recede and later return. Then it showed her Aldrin, her brother, who explored the ruins of the fallen worlds and sought out challenges to test himself. Then it showed Mara her own face and lingered on the secret brightness of her eyes. Last of all, leaving Mara imperious with disdain towards her own feelings, curtly aloof toward all who asked her what troubled her, it showed her Osana, who had remained behind. Mara dwelt on this puzzle. A mother who had remained behind, a sister with secrets, a brother who hunted and explored, and a woman who was plain and fierce. She understood then that the answer to her question lay within herself, and that to defeat what was coming, she would need a perfect understanding of herself. Isolation would be her watchword, for an isolated system is easiest of all to understand. First of all, Mara went into the gardens and planted a flower for her mother, who she thought must still live, though she might by now have forgotten her first daughter and her first son. "Mother," she said, "I asked to be your sister rather than your daughter, and so I denied you the chance to tell me your secret, the mother truth that is mapped in the negative space defined by the lies mothers tell their daughters. Well, here are my secrets. I love you. I've always loved you. Without you, I could have never been anything at all." Then she went to speak to her brother, but Aldrin was away on Mars, and she found only his empty chambers, the half-sharpened knives and rack of pistols. She knelt in grief and touched her hand to the floor where his pacing boots had scuffed the asteroid stone smooth. This was the shape of their siblinghood now, the pursuit of absences. Last of all, Mara went to Sheer Ido. Sheer was making a list of incredibly stupid and fatal tasks to post on a Guardian bounty board. "I want to tell you the truth," Mara said. "Ask me a question. If you take any positive integer and halve it if it's even, but triple it and add 1 if it's odd, and you repeat this process forever, will you eventually reach 1? Sheer Ido demanded. "Sheer, my faithful wrath," Mara said, "please take my openness seriously, though I'm sure Ilian could answer your math problem." "Okay," Sheer looked at her curiously. "Then here's my question. What's gotten into you? Why are you acting like this?" "Can we walk?" Mara asked her. And that's technically the end of that card. So we're going to pause there and talk a little bit about this.
I like I like that the Oracle engine is very much like Ahamkara. It doesn't really have a direct answer. It's I want to say the Oracle engine itself is almost alive. I mean, we already know what it's made of. It is internally, it is the singularity of Keldawaj having collapsed into its own singularity that the whole nine and all that crap did to her, encased in a housing of some sort. But like the fact that it doesn't give her a direct answer. Like she just straight up asks, like, "Hey, show me the sword that was death and how it would appear." Like, just give me a straight answer, straight prediction. And the Oracle engine gives her all these images, and so she keeps thinking of these images that it's showing her, and so she turns inward, right? Like she at the end of all this, she kind of thinks like, okay, well, it, if it's constantly showing things that are related to me or that are a part of me, the answer that I'm seeking must be within me, or somehow I am the answer, or somehow I can come up with the answer to this problem. And so then she explores that on her own. So it's interesting that the Oracle engine doesn't really I don't want to say it doesn't really do anything, but it didn't really do anything. It just kind of like was like, hey, here's some images and stuff, and Mara like left it up to Mara's interpretation of what to do, and so that's what she does.
It is interesting though that all of the people that it shows her have a single common thread, and that is, be it by fate, or be it by their own decisions, or be it by Mara's decision, these are all people that abandon her in some way.
Ooh.
Yeah, and
I never thought of it from that.
Maybe it's not. Maybe abandon's not the correct word. Osana chose to stay behind at the distributary. Sheer certainly doesn't choose to leave, but leaves regardless of someone else's power. Although they say here again, and later return, implying she's not gone.
I was going to ask about that. Like, that was the one thing that kind of really stuck out to me about this whole part, was that laughing bright with strength, who would recede and later return. I mean, are we like, is she dead? Is she not dead? Make up your mind.
I think it's pretty definitive she's not dead in the literal, in the classic sense. We don't know exactly what she is, but she's not dead. But the other one being Aldrin, who you may think it's odd to think of him abandoning Mara, when his whole character is around trying to impress her and do things for her. But I don't think that's necessarily that he's abandoning her. I think it's that she has chosen to abandon him in a lot of ways, and not really given him a choice. She has made him have some form of abandonment because he's always off trying to find things to impress her. So it's a little more subtle, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's one of those, like, when you cut someone off, you're also kind of forcing them to cut you off, whether they want to or not.
Oh, sure. It's like an indirect abandonment. Like,
kinda, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that.
So these are all people that are either have left or will leave her. And it is interesting that with that theme, she ultimately decides that she needs to isolate herself. And maybe that was what she pulled from this, is that the Oracle engine is telling me to pay attention to all of these people that are no longer in my life or will no longer be in my life. Maybe that means I need to be alone to survive this, whatever this coming thing is.
And I do like that thought of isolation, right? Like, where she says isolation would be her watchword for an isolated system is easiest of all to understand. I that to me is thinking in like a mathematical or a scientific mind, right? Like if I can isolate a variable, I can better understand this variable, or if I can isolate this element, I can better understand this element. Like, I like that thought. So I think she's thinking of herself in this big grand equation of sword and bomb. How can I define myself? How can I better understand myself? Well, if I isolate myself from everything around me, I can create a controlled variable, basically, or controlled something that I can then study and get a better understanding of.
Yeah, and I think her going through and doing these things, planting the flower for Osana and telling her secret, that she actually had love for her mother, although she never showed it, and trying to find Aldrin, and then successfully finding Sheer to start a conversation with her. These are all ways, I think, of her letting those people go in
I think so
in
too.
preparation for her self-isolation.
Yep.
And yeah, you pointed out, she says isolated system is the easiest of all to understand. That's because an isolated system is less complex. I think she's getting herself in the mindset a little bit of the sword logic so that she can come to understand it and utilize it against this coming calamity.
Okay. I like it. Oh, yeah, I like it. Well, then she says their interaction with Sheer was the
Yeah.
So it really is hard not to laugh during some of these, because when she was like making a list of incredibly stupid and fatal tasks to post on some Guardian bounty board, like, because some stupid Guardian's gonna go for it if there's loot involved. And then she asks us, can I ask you a question, or ask me a question? And she comes up with this: if you take any positive integer and have it if it's even, but triple it and add 1 if it's odd, and you repeat this process forever, will you always eventually reach 1? What?
This is purely sure just like taking the piss.
I think so. Like, and then Mara's just like, okay, I love you, but please listen.
Yeah, this is serious talk time. This is not be a jackass talk time.
If you want to be a jackass, you can go talk to Ellen. She can deal with your math problems. Yeah. So yeah, and then that I think that leads us directly into the next one.
It does. So the very next card that we're going to go over is Surprise Tyrannicide Part 3. And this is a direct continuation of 2. It is Mara and Sheer having this conversation. It's a conversation that we've kind of seen before. We've seen Mara have this talk with somebody else, and we'll see how if it goes any differently. So this one goes like this. Mara and Sheer Ido go out into space and kick off the hull, wearing Corsair skin pressure suits and slim tethers. The stars circle them like hard focus candles, like the diadems of a trillion dancers. Sheer Ido pulls herself close and touches helmets with Mara. We're alone. What's happened, Mara? You've always been, private, Mara suggests. Mysterious and reclusive, I was going to say. A sword can be part of a bomb if the sword's strike is the detonation mechanism, Mara says. It's impossible for a cellular automata game to change its own rules, but it is possible to create subgames with their own rules, and for those subgames to yield advantage in the master game. That's cool, Sheer says. When you talk like that, what you're actually saying is, I don't want anyone to understand me, but I want them to understand that they don't understand me. Yeah, Mara admits, and then hoarsely she makes herself say, Sure, I have a secret. This thing I did, and I don't know if anyone can know it without hating me forever. I had a secret too, Sheer reminds her. The thing I did. It's nothing compared to mine. Nothing at all. Having had some long experience hating you and then having given it up, I think it would be hard for me to go back. Sheer's strong hand settles at the small of Mara's back. They twirl on upward, rotating around a point between them, their 1,000-kilometer tethers slowly unfurling. Do you want to tell me? No, Mara says, but I think I have to. Okay. Your Majesty, what did you do that made Alice Lee throw blackberry tea in your face? I was first, Mara says, and she explains the missing half, the first half of the sentence. I made the rules and the initial conditions that deceived her into believing she herself had decided. It ended like that, where the rest picks up. Shiraido looks at her in expressionless silence. Shiraido's hands stroke the seam between Mara's skin suit and the glassy petals of her helmet. Long ago, this woman betrayed her oath and went to serve the Dicerum, a woman who cried out in anguish at the curse of physicality and the possibility of suffering. Long ago, this woman threw away her whole life to punish the highest crime she could imagine, the denial of transcendent divinity to those who might have claimed it. You're the devil, Shir says. You're the lone power who made death. You allowed the possibility of evil. You might be responsible for more preventable suffering than anything that has ever existed. Mara cannot shake her head or even nod. Well, Shir says, if you hadn't, none of us would be here. I guess I don't see what else you could have done if you cared about those we left behind. If you wanted us to be able to go back and help in the fight. She leans forward and very gently kisses the inside of her helmet where it meets Mara's in her mind. In her mind, in that place that is bound to all other Awoken, Mara feels the touch of gentle lips. Shir looks suddenly sly. You know, Mara, I don't think you could have confessed anything at all, unless it were a way of keeping a deeper secret. What's really going on? There are many ways to godhood, Mara tells her. The belt of Orion glitters on her helmet like a 3-star rating left by some hive entity Shir once killed. One way is to kill all that is killable, so all that remains must be immortal. Another is the road I have walked, mostly by accident. One of these ways is closer to the sword, and one is closer to the bomb. If the bomb can defeat the sword by the standards of the sword, then the bomb has claim to primacy. Never mind, Shir sighs. Seen anything cool on Crow surveillance lately? And that's where they end that card.
Wow. I just wow. I this huh. Huh. This card leaves me speechless every time. Yeah. It I Myth, you want to break this down? I'm having problems with words right now. The only thing I can focus on right now is literally like you're the devil. And the only reason why I think like it's interesting because Sheer finally asks the question, right? What did you do that made Alice Lee throw blackberry tea in your face? And of course Mara answers it in full detail, doesn't even like leave any bit of it out. And Sheer says the exact same thing that Alice Lee says. You're the devil. But not necessarily in this like I hate you for it kind of way, but like more of like you're the devil in the fact that you created death in and this is where I'm going to kind of like I'm going to kind of dive off of this a little bit into uh into a religion sense. So if we think of the story of heaven and the story of paradise, Lucifer is a fallen angel, and he is the reason that death exists. And so I think that is where Sheer is coming at from. She's looking at it from that point of view, right? She's not thinking of like you're an evil person, like everything you have done has been evil because you've denied, you know, you the preventing suffer to be responsible for more preventable suffering than anything that ever existed. Basically saying like, if you had just made us gods, we would have been fine. Everything would have been fine. We wouldn't have had to go back. Like there would have been no the Odyssey War. There would have been no Diacerum. None of that shit would have happened back then. We wouldn't have come back through the portal. We wouldn't have to deal with all this crap on the reef. We wouldn't have to deal with all this suffering back here in the Sol system. But if you hadn't have done that, none of us would be where we're at right now. None of us would have existed. Like we could have just all been killed, all those years ago on the Exodus screen when the darkness enveloped them. And Mara could just said, no, screw it, kill us all. Like I want to go back to help those on Earth, but everyone on the ship doesn't. So since I'm the closest thing to it, I'm just going to say boop and kill us all. But Mara didn't. Mara did something that drove the Awoken people while they were in the distributary to want something more, to not necessarily desire godhood, like to even have some sort of decision of going back and helping Earth. And so I think Sheer, again, I think Sheer is not necessarily looking at this and calling her the devil is like, you evil witch, get out of my face, get the hell out of my life, is more of a like, almost like stating a fact. Like if you are anything, you are the devil because you created the amount of the you allowed the possibility of evil. You allowed the possibility of death. So, but again, her turning back on that and going, that sucks, but you cared about everyone left behind. You wanted to have some reason to come back to the Sol system. You wanted to help those of Earth. So yeah, speechless. I say speechless.
So what comes to my mind reading this and listening to what you were talking about, interpretation of it, actually fairly recently, it's going to show how much of a nerd I am. I just finished watching a 4-part series put on by the Critical Role group called Calamity. Which for those that don't know,
where I scream and point at you and go nerd.
For those that don't know, it's a D&D show. But the description that they give of the proverbial devil of that world, that entity describes himself as not being, he doesn't deny that he is responsible for the creation of suffering or the creation of hopelessness or the creation of death. But he claims they were gifts to the world because without these negative opposites, without hopelessness, hope has no meaning. Without death, life has no value. Ooh. And argues it in the way of like, I did all of these terrible things, but I did them so that the creations of the world would know what good things even are and that they are worth having.
Oh my God.
And I draw a lot of parallels between that ideology and what Mara did, because as Sheer said, if you hadn't done that, if you hadn't made us the way we are, we never would have been here. I think also implying like, if you'd made everyone gods, no one would know the value of life enough to want to come back and save lives. No one would know the value of knowledge enough to want to try and develop new, greater technologies, because they would be omniscient and omnipotent within their universe, and she would never have been able to lead an expedition out of that.
Man. Yeah.
So and
I like it.
Sheer, like you said, says the same exact thing that Alice Lee did. However, and I then they really highlight this. Sheer Ido used to be the champion of the Diasarim. She had devoted her entire life to righting the wrong that was denying the Awoken people their godhood that she had thought Alice Lee had done. And now discovering that the woman she has been following and the woman that she has loved for quite some time at this point is the one that her entire being in the distributary was so vehemently against. And yet, Sheer does what Alice Lee did not, and that is to accept that choice and decide to not ostracize Mara for it, but to show her compassion for what that means for Mara. Is what, not just what it means for everyone that Mara quote unquote did this to, but what it means for Mara to carry that.
Yep.
And
to not throw blackberry tea in her face.
And to not throw blackberry tea. Although it would be quite a feat to do in the middle of deep space with
right off the edge of with the be the slowest moving tea ever. Like a prize fight.
And Sheer also knows Mara well enough to come to the realization that the only reason you would have confessed that kind of bomb is if it's just to cover up an even bigger secret. So what is it? And Mara tells her.
Answer with this. What do we call it? A metaphor? An allegory? I don't know. So, allegory wrapped in a metaphor?
A little bit of, I mean, some of it's literal. Some of it is actually literal.
Sure.
So Mara outright tells Sheer, she says there are many ways to godhood. One is the path of the sword, to kill everything, which is what the Hive were doing at the time.
Yep.
Until you're the last thing standing. Still kind of the ideology of the dark. And the other is of the bomb, which she doesn't explain to Sheer, but she says, this is the path I'm on, this path of the bomb. And I have discovered that my path can still lead me to godhood if I use the sword to, if I use the path of the sword to intentionally, quote unquote, detonate the bomb. She is in somewhat, metaphorically and cryptic speech, telling Sheer, I'm gonna let Oryx kill me.
Yeah.
That is the hidden truth behind these words, and she's not lying. She's telling Sheer the truth, but she's intentionally doing it in such a way that she knows Sheer doesn't really understand. And so Sheer just kind of hand waves away. She's like, yeah, whatever. You know what? Seen anything cool on TV? Like,
even Sheer's kind of just like, all right, this is bullshit. Like, you wanted a serious thing out of me, then you got a serious thing out of me, then you hit me with this, and whatever. I don't even care anymore.
Oh. So
where does that take us to?
So that takes us to actually a lore card from D1. This is the Queen's Ransom Grimoire card. And this is technically taking place right after the House of Wolves expansion. So to give a little bit of information about the House of Wolves, we know that during the Reef Wars, the Wolves were the house that the Awoken had their battle with to prevent them from joining the other forces on Earth. They wiped out a large portion of them, defeated them. Most of the wolves became subservient to Mara, seeing her as their new Kel. While their old Kel, Skolas, was, I believe he was imprisoned at the time.
I think so. Yeah,
And
because he ends up breaking out during
yes,
the expansion, and that's the whole thing that leads us to the prison of elders, to us getting us getting him recaptured, and then we just fight him over and over again.
yeah. So I guess I should back up even a little more. Our guardian has entered the scene at this point, a little bit in D1. So our guardian was resurrected, had the interactions with with Mara and Aldrin during the D1 vanilla campaign, which is essentially just meeting them and then Aldrin telling us we need the Eye of a Gate Lord to get access to the garden, bringing that to him, having him begrudgingly make us a key out of it. And then we go to the garden and kill the Black Heart. After which we are kind of hailed by the Awoken, saying, we've got this escaped prisoner. We're calling in our debt for helping you before. You need to help us with this situation now. We hunt down Skolas, who is trying to use Vex technology to build up an army of fallen from across different timelines, I suppose. Because is he in the Vault of Glass at one point?
I don't remember if he's directly in the vault, but we definitely go to the top of the Ishtar Collective.
Yeah.
And that's like going up to the top of that, because I remember we do that both there and I think later on when we're chasing Shades of Oryx, we end up there as well. But I do remember specifically going to the top of that and him getting captured.
Yes.
And so I don't think we ever actually go inside the Vault of Glass, but the structure that's above it, the Ishtar Collective Tower, that goes just clear into the stratosphere of Venus, has a lot. I mean, it's Vex tech all the way up, and
Yeah.
I think I don't know if this is proven or not. I think that point above the Vault of Glass has a lot of like what would you call it? It has like a lot of uh Vexy stuff, for lack of a better term. That it's like concentrated Vex. You know what I mean? Like it everything about it can be used to access portals, to access information, to access possibly even the Vex network from there. Like it's very much like an easy access pillar there.
Definitely a lot of Vex portals, for sure, that I remember being there.
Oh yeah. He's porting people in like left and right as you're fighting him on the way up.
And I don't recall if he was specifically trying to use like the Vex time. Well, because they don't time travel, and that's the thing. So I don't think he was pulling Fallen in from other timelines. I think he was specifically using their gate technology to consolidate an army in one spot quickly.
Yep.
I think that's what it was.
Yep.
But needless to say, we fight him. We beat his ass because, of course, we do. And
hey, we're VIP 2014.
Damn straight. And Petra swoops down and captures him, sucks him into a awoken prison vessel, and transports him back to the prison of elders. And we didn't know it at the time, but Skolas has seen some things, and he transmits a message over to Mara through Varix, that a lot of that at the time others thought was just gibberish, but I think Mara knew that what he was talking about. So this is from the Queens of Ransom, which is again a D1 Grimoire card, and this is immediately after Skolas has been recaptured. And it goes like this. A bellow erupts from the barred grate at her feet. Bony fingers claw at the bars, their sharp points just inches from her toes. Prince Aldrin chuckles. At the edge of the room, the Techians circle, their implants glowing faintly blue in the shadows. He's been musing since Petra. Bring him. Varix injects, practically purring with glee. He say Kell of Kells over and over, and other such nonsense. Skolas bellows again. Varix strikes Skolas' grasping fingers with his staff. The queen's expression remains mild. She looks down her nose at the glowing eyes burning into the shadows beneath the grate. Skolas falls abruptly silent. Then a low, soft growl, almost like a whine, echoes from the cell below. Varix's mechanical hands click as he snaps them together in surprise. Once he begins Aldrin, Varix interrupts him with a burst of guttural clicks directed at the grate. The queen does not react. What did he say? He says, Varix hisses under his breath. He makes no sense, my queen. He speaks of light snuffer, dark binder. The queen aims her eyes at Skolas, her expression unchanged. I see. He will not say more. He does not need to. She turns towards the door. My queen, what of this one? Says Aldrin. He awaits your sentence. You would not sentence a rabid dog, or a hive thrall, or a bomb. The queen's justice is wasted on one such as this. She paused. Varix. Yes, your grace. Skolas is yours. Let the children of the light have their play with him. Ah, you are might and justice, my queen, my Kell. The Techians gather at the door as the queen approaches it. Prince Aldrin holds it open with a small bow, and the queen touches his shoulder as she passes. Send a crow to Mercury, and another to our new friend in the tower. And that's where that card ends.
You face Skolas, yes. They are dead. You are not.
I love the Prison of Elders. That was such a fun activity.
It was a good one.
As far as like a 10. So when that expansion did come out, the whole House of Wolves thing, it was what, $10 at the time. Like, I mean, it was a very cheap little DLC thing. I don't even want to call it an expansion. It was a cheap DLC, and for what it gave, like, it actually was really, really fun. But yeah, I like that even Varix doesn't quite seem to know what Skolas is talking about. But it seems like Skolas has just been driven mad. But I think he's been driven mad from his manipulation of the Vex tech from the Ishtar Collective.
I think it's very possible Skolas has had a glimpse into a Vex simulation of Oryx's incoming attack.
Absolutely, because we know that Oryx has dealt with Quoria, and who's to say what Quoria retransmitted back to the Vex network before she was fully, I can't say fully cut off, because even Oryx left her with some sort of will. But yeah, like I think you're right. I think he absolutely found some sort of simulation through something and just went mad over it. Just like went nuts. Was like, that's cool that I'm not going to get an army to take over the last city, but this other guy, he's even worse than I am, and he's going to come F all of you up. Like last city, the Awoken, he's just going to kill everyone. He don't care. So yeah, my little game will be won eventually, and the only person in the room that even understands this is Mara, because she knows. Like she's just straight up, okay, well, if the Vex if he's seen some sort of thing to even suggest this, all right, that just kind of proves that yeah, it's on its way. It's coming. And I like what you were saying too, that when this Grimoire card first came out, because this is like the very end of this is after obviously the entire campaign of the House of Wolves. A lot of people looked at this like, what the fuck does this even mean? but now looking back on it, that's absolutely what it was. It was the foretelling of Oryx coming to the Soul System.
Yeah. And remind me if you happen to know, House of Wolves was after Dark Below?
Dark Below was second. Below,
okay.
House of Wolves came first, then Dark Below.
So a lot of people at the time, during D1 after Dark Below came out, probably would have thought this lore card was referring to Crota, but I don't think that's
absolutely.
the case.
No, no. I mean, what are the two words that he used again?
Light Snuffer and Dark Binder.
Yeah, I think that's Oryx. I think that's directly calling out, hey, this is Oryx coming. Because Crota is never mentioned in like anytime we've had mention of Crota to us as the Guardian, I don't think he's ever anything other than Crota, Will of Oryx, right? Or not Will of Oryx. Is he Will of Oryx?
He's not Will of Oryx. I forget what his title is. If he had, I know he has one, but I don't remember what it was offhand. I don't think it was anything of Oryx. I don't think Oryx's name was mentioned at all.
That's what I'm saying. Crota was a fucking nobody. He really was a nobody. Like as cool as it was to when he came to the Soul System, and that was like our first true brush with like darkness and the Hive, and like, hey, this is a big bad baddie. He's gonna eat your lunch, and he really wasn't shit. Like,
I mean, yes and no. There are certainly many more powerful beings in the Hive pantheon.
Oh, absolutely.
But we can't discount the fact that he murdered thousands of Guardians on the moon. Like, he caused a calamity on the moon.
I do often forget that too.
Like,
so yeah.
He and part of that, I think, is also just his presentation in game wasn't particularly scary because the raid was kind of a joke.
Yeah. I mean, what was the old trick? Everyone sat up on the outside of the glass and just shot him with icebreaker, and while one person sorted him to death, and it took all of like 5 minutes.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I feel like if that raid had been more difficult, because thematically I think it was great, but if it hadn't been such a rollover experience with the gear that was available at the time, especially.
Right.
I think people would have had a little different view of Crota. Because Crota in the lore is scary as fuck.
Right. Like, I mean, and that's the thing too. Like, I'm not going to discount somebody who can cut holes in reality. Like, that's a whole thing on itself. Crota could have been a 3-man dungeon. And so that's where even I personally have kind of like this weak opinion of him. Like, it was just like, yeah, it's Crota. Who gives a shit? But I think you're right. Like, as far as lore, like he definitely is a lot more powerful as a lore character than in the in-game representation of him did him dirty.
Yeah. But so at this point now, Mara has had her own premonitions about this incoming force. She has had the vague explanations of the Oracle engine. And now she has another entity, Skolas, outside of everything else that seems to be referencing a similar event or figure.
Well, and he references, or not he, I think Mara at the end of that references someone in the tower.
So she's saying, send a missive to Mercury and send a missive to our friend at the tower.
And I'm assuming there is the friend at the tower, is that Eris, or is that or is that us, the Guardian?
You could have taken it as us, the Guardian, but I think it's Eris. And who lives on Mercury at this point in time but Osiris.
Osiris, yeah.
And we get to see a meeting between these three.
Yeah, that's interesting that she would be personal with Osiris.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they would have met, or how they would know of each other, but he heeds the call, and we see a meeting between who is theorized, because no names are used, to be Mara Sov, Eris Morn, Osiris, and Aldrin. And that meeting is described in the Grimoire card Ghost Fragment, The Queen 2. And that one goes like this. You don't have one. The hunter came to a halt in front of the throne, raised her covered face to meet the prince's gaze. No, she agreed. My next death will be my last. I know the feeling, the prince said dryly. The queen kept her expression carefully distant. She sat reclined in her throne, legs crossed, surveying the two figures at the base of the steps. Beside her were the wolves' guard used to stand. Techians, Shuro and Sadia hovered instead, their jewel-like augments gently humming. To her right and just before stood the prince, facing forward, but his body half turned back toward her. Your Grace, said the man before her at the foot of the stairs. His voice was soft but strong. When he spoke, the hunter started to turn her head toward him, then flinched as if someone had shone a bright light into her eyes. Thank you for your gracious welcome, he said. The queen inclined her head slightly. Before we begin, said the hunter, I will say this. She paused, her head tilted up to the throne. The queen waved her hand in assent. The hunter's pale lips tightened slightly, then resumed their usual stony mien. Your Grace, she said. Shuro and Sadia shifted, a sudden rustling and whispering. The queen raised one finger to silence them. Aldrin's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Your Grace, I am not here for you. The queen stared at the hunter, her expression studiously unchanged. I have no wish to play politics. I have no grievance with the city, not any more. I have no grand hopes to end the war, for long have I known I will not see its end. I am here for one battle, and one alone, because it is a battle we must all fight, together or separately. But I will warn the defenders, together or separately. I will do anything. Her low voice shook with passion. To end Oryx. A silence rang out in the room. The hunter kept her head raised, her ambiguous gaze directed at the shadows in the throne where the queen reclined. Then a small smile curved the queen's lips. Well said. She straightened and leaned slightly forward so the room's light fell on her face. So let us end him. And that's the end of that lore card.
Yeah. Let's go kick some ass.
So again, names are never used. It's pretty obvious to me. The hunter with no ghost is Eris.
Gotta be. And she would be the most inclined to be in that meeting to say, let's go end Oryx, because of her whole dealings with Crota. Like her whole fire team was wiped out when they went to try to take on Crota. She literally had to make I mean, I don't know if this is stated or not, but I'm pretty sure this is what happened. She found or had a piece of Ahamkara bone and made a wish to survive that and get out of there. And that's the rock that's encased in hive magic that she holds around with us, or she runs around the universe with. And she's got her three eyes and the darkness pouring from it, all that. Like that's Eris.
Yeah, and we don't see much mentioned about this other person, this other man at the foot of the stairs. All we get is that When Eris looks at him, she flinches as if someone had shone a bright light into her eyes. Now, this could literally be Osiris, and her hive eyes don't like staring at entities of light. Although that doesn't make sense now, knowing how involved she's been with other light bearers, primarily our player guardian.
Us. Yeah.
But what this might be is a reflection, literally
That's what I was gonna
an
ask.
image of him made out of light, which would probably be pretty, hard to look upon.
That's what I was thinking it was. That was my interpretation. And the only person that we know of that's ever done any type of reflections is Osiris. So that's,
Yeah.
I think you're right there. I think that's a good line of logic to follow through.
So at this point, Mara has gathered this group of people with the intent of creating a plan to end Oryx.
I was going to say, now she's got a name for death.
Now she's got a name. And the next card we pick up on is Throne, which is from the Dreaming City book. And this talks about them creating a throne world as part of their ultimate plan, or part of Mara's ultimate plan for dealing with Oryx, or more appropriately using Oryx to her advantage. And this card confirms, if there was any doubt from the previous one, that the hunter was Eris Morn. So this one goes like this. Eris Morn returned to the Vestian outpost. Because she spoke well, it was agreed that aid would be traded for intelligence and a long-term alliance. In this way, the Awoken were the first to know of the great navigator, his philosophies, his strategies, his weaknesses. And as the Coven contemplated the possibilities laid wide before this god-king's far-flung sword, it was decreed that they would build a throne world beneath an energy well as blind as the ferryman Charon. Nasia drew the schematics. Portia worked out the calculations. They made their first test with a small rift generator on the eastern shore. Satisfied that their methods were sound, then they went to a grand cathedral to dig the well. There, Lucille and Sadia augured the first borehole with the help of Riven, who had taken the shape of a needle-nosed basilisk, while Kali and Shirochi constructed the gate itself, deep below in a hall they called the Confluence. Ilin made the tincture after tincture of queen's foil until her clothes stank and her hands were stained reddish-black. Open-eyed, she walked between planes and sorted the threads of reality on a vast metaphysical loom, weaving some closer, some more distant. Mara and Riven shaped her third throne together, and the artistry of their work was a testament to the hungry joy they felt in that partnership. They named it Eleusinia, and it was in those ascendant halls that Mara finally carved a statue for sure. When it came time to connect the well to the unreality that lay beyond the gateway, Sadia asked, "Would it not be wiser to leave this door without a key?" Riven, now an immense antlered serpent with broad tiger paws, tightened around the perimeter of the room like a noose. Egg, Mara corrected absently, chewing on her thumbnail. The key is so heavy as to be unliftable, Callie ventured, since they were speaking metaphorically. Sadia flapped her hand dismissively. Yes, I know. They all knew that the gate required a continuous, multi-week charge of paracausal energies, and that almost nothing in the solar system could produce such energies at the scale required. Almost. It's just, do we wish to trust the Guardians? Ilian filled in dryly. Mara ran her hand along the sleek surface of the primary well's control mechanism. then turned and walked alone toward the fresh, foggy air that blew in from the coast. The Techians watched her go. "There is only the plan," Ilian said. "Remember your vows, Cydia." And that's where that lore card ends.
Dude, this one is great because like as you're reading this, I'm seeing these places on the Dreaming City. Like, obviously the first part there, Eris talks about, the Awoken were the first to know the Great Navigator. That is, the Great Navigator is Oryx. That was he was also, I think the first Navigator is actually the title that he has, or one of his titles.
I think there's a few that are kind of used synonymously: Great Navigator, First Navigator.
Absolutely. But they got, talked about his philosophies, his strategies, his weaknesses. They it was decreed that they would build a throne world beneath an energy well as blind as the ferryman Charon. Who's Charon? Are we talking like River Styx?
Yeah. So for those that
Holy shit.
Don't know,
Charon I'm paying attention. I feel good about myself.
Yeah. Charon is the blind ferryman that if the practice in ancient Greece being that they would bury someone with a coin in their mouth or a coin on their head, and that coin was to be used to pay the ferryman Charon to take their soul across the river Styx to Hades, and then be sorted into whatever level of the underworld that they were deemed worthy for.
Or if you watch a lot of Disney, thrown in a giant green swirling vortex.
That is not accurate at all. I have nothing against the movie Hercules, but that was wrong.
Yeah, Disney is not exactly accurate with their depictions of Hades.
Not so much.
Yeah. But yeah, they literally call this place an energy well as blind as a ferryman. Is that why they call it Blind Well? I mean, presumably.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is the blind well that they're describing there, that they're building.
They're building, and they're telling you what its actual purpose is here as well. Is for us guardians. They are banking on guardians coming and doing the blind well activity, essentially. And the blind well is sucking paracausal energy in over the course of multiple weeks to open a portal to this throne world that they're building.
Yeah. And they even mention a small rift generator on the eastern shore. Is that the public event?
Yep. That was their test.
Holy shit. In front of the big statue, right?
Uh-huh.
Holy shit.
And that's why that public event only exists in that spot in the Dreaming City, and something similar has never shown up anywhere else.
Oh my god. Dude, that's awesome that they have like a lore explanation as to why we're doing said public event. Like, we just happen to stumble upon this rift generator. And that's probably why when you turn it heroic, it kind of takes you to an ascendant plane, right? Like, that's like the test of it.
Yeah, that's exactly what it does.
Oh my god. Mm-hmm. Oh my god. This is brilliant. I'm falling in love with this lore card here. There's also mention of Kali and Shirochi. So we've had mention of Cydia, Kali, and Shirochi. Yep. And again, we'll talk in length of those at a later date. But those are definitely names to keep in your mind for later episodes. They talk about constructing a gate called the Confluence. That's where you used to have to physically go to access the throne world. Well, at the time that you access, it's called the Shadow Throne. But anyway, that's where you actually go to access this place in game. And so a lot of these things can be visited in game. Let's see here. There's another one too that
I think all of them.
I think all of it. Yeah, the blind well, the small rift generator, the grand cathedral underneath. Obviously the confluence. You can still go there, and it tells you you're at the confluence. There's another one. Oh, Eleusinia. Now that's inside the throne world, right?
Eleusinia is the name that Mara gave the throne world.
Oh, that's so that's like the proper name of it.
That is the proper name of it. We, only know it as the Shattered Throne.
Right.
At this point, because, well, things happened.
Yeah, we're not there yet. Don't spoil the story yet. She mentions that she finally carved a statue for Sheer, and that's
Yes.
it for the Awoken people. You only carve statues for people that are dead. So in Mara's mind, at least, it's interesting that she carves this statue in her throne world and not in the Dreaming City. So there's got to be some symbolism there, right? Like even Mara's not fully on board with this idea that Sheer is dead.
Yeah, and I think we could see a couple things here. Mara's not carving a statue in the Dreaming City, but for everyone to see. But she's carving a statue in her throne world, which is a more private space, a space that maybe means more to her. So she may be saying here, not that she believes Sheer is dead and is never going to return, because the Oracle engine told her that Sheer would leave and return. But maybe that Sheer is now dead to her, the facet that she and Sheer can no longer be in a relationship when Sheer returns.
Right.
Like Mara will have ascended to that godhood that she was always afraid Sheer would see her as.
Back like a long way. Which was it? Where she's like, Sheer's like, are you a god? And Mara's like, you can't treat me like that. So that, oh man, I didn't even think of it from that sense. Oh man, that's like coming full circle there. That's, oh my god.
Yeah, I also want to make a quick note about the name. Eleusinian means relating to ancient Eleusis, or the religious mysteries celebrated in worship of Demeter and Persephone. And for those not familiar, again, this is Greek mythology. For those not familiar, Demeter was the goddess, if I recall correctly, the goddess of winter, or the goddess of nature. And her daughter, Persephone, was, depending on your telling of the myth, either eloped or was kidnapped and taken to Hades, taken to the underworld and held prisoner there, until eventually a contract was negotiated where she could return to the outside world once a year, and her return is what brought about the season of spring. The whole mythology being that her mother Demeter was so sad at her absence, that's what causes the season of fall and then winter. And then when Persephone is allowed to roam free again, you have spring and summer.
Yeah, there's definitely a Greek Ph.D. working at Bungie headquarters, and they're on the lore staff. I'm fully convinced now.
But there are some parallels we can draw here. Like if we think about the whole someone that's being forced into the underworld, and then a contract is brokered to allow their return. Maybe that's Sheer forced to be wherever she is now.
Oh my god!
And she's eventually going to return. Let's say this could also be Mara creating her throne world as her version of the underworld, because she's created a grave for Sheer, and so she's kidnapping Sheer from wherever she is and bringing her here in some form. There's a lot of different interpretations you could see from it.
Okay, well now my thing doesn't sound so cool. My thing was like, well, what if she's being like held hostage by the Nine? And now my thing's just not as cool as what you said. As usual. So yeah. Creation of Mara's throne world, Eleusinian.
Yep. And the banking on that Guardians will open it.
Oh, I mean, just
in the future.
Tell them there'll be loot. That's easy.
Yeah,
That's
more or less.
That's the guardian portion of this equation is easy. So Throne World's created.
Throne World's created. So now that Mara has conferred with Eris and Osiris and has developed a plan, she knows more about Oryx, his weaknesses, his strengths. She's created her own pocket throne world as part of that plan in preparation for whatever this event is to come. That brings us then to the lore card Tyrannicide 4 of the Awoken of the Reef book. Talking about the events immediately before her confrontation with Oryx. And it goes like this. It is the night before the day of screams. Mara meditates, cross-legged, in a cradle of null gravity. Varix has told her more than once how the fallen speak of the Awoken as sterile, unable to regrow their flesh, cursed to bear their scars forever. Also, how they think of the Awoken as self-twinned, coexisting with their own shadows. Didn't ancient Inanna, Queen of Heaven, descend into the underworld to confront her shadow twin sister, Ereshkigal? Inanna was judged full of hubris and executed. You cannot defeat a thing that is synonymous with death except on its own territory. You cannot fear and flee from death. You must face it. Death is a sword, and a sword is like a crossing point, like a bridge. And a bridge may be walked two ways. The plan exists in her mind alone, although beloved Eris has by necessity learned most of it. The Techians do not know the whole plan, although they will position the harbingers upon the threshold. Even sweet, capable Petra does not know the whole plan. So many she will leave behind. Aldrin knows nothing of the whole plan. He is kept more and more to himself, building up secrets and schemes, all Mara knows, because he needs Mara and thinks he can get her attention by keeping secrets from her. Secrets are her virtue and the virtue of her nemesis, the being whose existence she deduced from the analogy of family the Oracle engine showed her. Mara will begin the end of the Queen's brother today. She knows what that means for the fate of her own. An eye for an eye. She must think now of the fate of the entire cosmos, and of her tender, half-assembled answer to the cold sword logic of the hive. She must not grieve. She must not fear. Was Inanna afraid when she descended? Mara's not going to be outclassed by some ancient fable. After all, Mara's name is death. But there is one thing she admires most about Inanna over all the other myths of Catabases. Inanna went to conquer. And that's the end of that lore card.
I'm very impressed you got the twin sister name right on that one.
I mean, I think I did. I don't know.
That was a fucking hard one. I was following along and I got to that one. I was like, oh God, what's going to happen? Yeah, no, this is Mara, like, cutting, like, the final cut, right? Like, cutting herself off. And I think that I want to say, and maybe I'm crazy, but I want to say on this same night, Uldren is telling the story on the Aegir Scepter.
The same day. It's earlier in the same day.
Right.
Because Mara hosts this big feast and festival, essentially.
Right.
Because although the Awoken don't know what her plan is, the Awoken fleet knows they're flying out to face an enemy tomorrow. And so she puts on this grand festival and feast to give people good memories before heading into war, essentially.
Oh my God.
Leave behind good memories for the loved ones you leave behind, and have good memories of potentially your last day before entering battle. So it's during that celebration that Aldrin is telling these two children the story of the Ager's scepter, which I forget what the characters' names are in the story, but they're analogies essentially for Mara and Aldrin leaving the distributary.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know why that thought just struck my mind of Ager's scepter, and it being on the same day as this, and it kind of blows my mind that even, like, their heads are in two different spots. Like, Aldrin's still telling the stories of heroes and whatnot, and Mara's still down to cutting everything off, and even like the like I want to say like the last line or so of Ager's scepter's like. Mara's kind of pissed at Aldrin. She's like, "Stop telling them these lies. Like, stop making up all this shit." Like, it even at that point in time, she's trying to create that cut. She's trying to cut herself off to where she can become a god. I think like that's and maybe not become a god. That's where I don't know Mara's true intent here. Like, and I don't think anybody does. I mean, she says as much throughout this whole thing. Like, nobody really knows the whole plan. The only one that has learned most of it is Eris by necessity, because I think because she needs Eris to like maybe lead the Guardian a little bit and be like, hey, create a little bit of intrigue, create a little bit of secrecy here, lead them on this hunt, get them to power the engine and all that stuff.
I'm guessing she needed Eris as well to inform her as to like how throne worlds work.
Oh, absolutely.
And like what the mechanics of that are. And for anyone that is wondering, like, how does Eris know all this? This is all taking place post the Dark Below.
Yep.
Where Eris has been freed from the Hellmouth, and she spent a significant amount of time there, like a number of years. And not only was she surviving, but she was learning everything she could about the hive. So that is where she drew this knowledge about Oryx and about like how the hive work and the hive rituals, because she had to live amongst them in secret for years, and is now trying to weaponize that knowledge because she sees Mara as someone that could help her achieve the ultimate goal of getting revenge on the hive race, essentially. Yeah, I think it's also interesting here. So with this particular card, I do think Mara has been trying to isolate herself, and she says knowing that she knows her plan is going to break Aldrin.
Oh yeah.
I don't think she knows how. I don't think she can predict just what happens, say in Forsaken, but she knows that when she enacts her plan, he's not going to be the same person anymore.
Yep.
And has come to terms with that kind of being like unfortunate collateral damage for the greater good. And throughout all of the entries, we've always seen Mara try and treat Aldrin at an arm's length. But it's like, I don't think we should confuse that with a lack of caring. I think she has always cared. Even here, she says Mara knows and pities that because he needs Mara, he thinks he can get her attention by keeping secrets. Like she knows what he wants.
Oh, sure.
She's known what he's wanted for a long time. And it's just that she has always believed her destiny or her ultimate goal to be to not allow her to entertain his needs at all. That like he's constantly being a sacrifice for her ambitions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And maybe not even like directly, like just kind of inadvertently by the way of him trying
Right.
to prove himself.
Well, and because he's close to her.
Right.
And, by nature of being close to her and continually striving to remain close to her, she's having to constantly push him away.
Yep.
Whereas if he had just given up and been like, you know what, sis, you're a dick. I'm done talking to you. Like, in a weird way, that probably would have been easier on both of them.
I think you're right.
But he doesn't have it in him to do it, and she doesn't have it in her to make a clean break either.
Well, and I mean, I still think of like, what is Mara's ultimate goal or ultimate plan? And I feel like during this whole time that we've been covering this, the story of the Awoken, I've always thought of it as the ultimate goal is to go back and save or help Earth against whatever that entity was that interfered and interacted with them on the Exodus Green. And I don't know anymore, man. I don't.
No, I think that is. I think because if we go back to why did she leave the distributary?
Right.
That was it. She left the distributary to go back to Earth and provide aid. But she didn't see providing aid in the same way that the now Earthborn Awoken did, of like, oh, we need to go down and help with medical supplies and technological advancements. I think she saw providing aid. Yeah, I think she interpreted providing aid as like, that's all well and good, but if you spend the next, hundreds of years, 300, 400 years building them up just for that thing to come back and wipe everyone out, then we didn't do our job.
Oh my God.
So I think from her perspective, it's always been about, as long as something of humanity remains, that's enough, because I'm trying to protect them on a cosmic scale, not on a local scale.
You know who else thinks like that? Our lovely little Russian war mind. As long as 1% survives, that's 1%. Even if 0.1% survives, that is a surviving entity of humanity. Oh my God.
So I think in her mind at this point in time, she's constantly trying to see what is my way to get to that next echelon of power so that I can be a defender when the ultimate time comes. And she saw Oryx not only as a threat to her, like if Oryx killed her and, for good, she's failed at her job. So she's trying to figure out, how do I survive Oryx? And in addition to that, how do I use him to gain that next level of power to be the better defender the next time something else comes along?
Oh, because Oryx is big and bad, but on a cosmic scale, Oryx is like an ant.
Well, she knows Oryx was not what they faced on the Exodus Green.
Right.
So she's using this plan. She's enacting this plan to become more powerful. I think still with the intention of the defense of humanity is her ultimate goal.
Absolutely.
But she's just the long-term defense, not the we're going to make things better for now defense.
That's a man. Good on her.
Because even in the very last line here, she's likening herself to this mythological figure Inanna. And she said the one thing she admired most about Inanna over all other myths of Catabases, which is Journey to the Underworld, is that Inanna went to conquer.
Yeah.
Mara's going to conquer death.
Because Mara's name is is death.
Mara's name means death.
Yeah.
So that brings us.
I was going to say, does that bring us to the moment?
That brings us
to
the premiere cutscene of the Taken King expansion in Destiny 1.
I'm so giddy, like a little schoolgirl.
So, do you want to do the description?
I
for
would
this, then?
love to. This was
Take it away.
this was the cutscene that like. So I started playing Destiny at Taken King. So the first cutscene of Destiny that I ever saw was this cutscene, and it's this massive ship sitting in the rings of Saturn, and all these little ships circling it, and kind of like very ominous, like not really moving anywhere, just kind of sitting. And then there's this other ship, this very royal ship that flies in, and it's I know now that it's a Kesh. It's a fallen, a massive fallen ship that has been repurposed as Mara's flagship, and it's got Mara's symbol all over it. If you ever look at the Dreaming City weapon, or the Dreaming City, no, the Last Wish weapons, they have this little like circle with almost this W in it. That's like Mara's symbol. Petra had it in D1 on her chest, and that was like the banner you could get from her, the little emblem and everything. And anyway, so the ship is here, and it shows this very regal lady, the queen of the Awoken, surrounded by three Techians and an entire fleet of Awoken ships. In one of them is Uldren, because Uldren is obviously very, very apt at piloting these ships and being a warrior, as we've seen throughout the entire history of the Awoken. Like he is a very, very well versed warrior, and so they start clashing with these hive ships one on one in space and in the rings of Saturn, and then the camera kind of pans over to the big entity that's on this stationary ship in the rings, and it's this massive hive holding this massive sword. And this hive is Oryx, and this sword is Willbreaker. And he takes his sword, and he's standing in kind of this pool of whatever, and slams his sword down into it. And it starts this chain reaction on the outside of the ship. And as this chain reaction is building up on the outside of the ship to almost this like Death Star looking beam thing in the center of it, Mara's Techians and Mara start chanting, and they start creating these ontological weapons that are designed to like unmake you from time or whatever, and they start hurling them in free space at this ship, and these beams of light are flying at it, and then all of a sudden the center weapon of this massive hive ship builds up enough power and unleashes itself and destroys everything. I mean, Mara's ship explodes into a million pieces. Like Mara, after she does whatever she's doing in this space, she kind of falls over, and then the blast wave comes further and further out and just engulfs everything, kills so many Awoken lives and possibly even hive lives. Shoot, I don't know if it was indiscriminate or not, but it leaves this massive hole in the ring, in Saturn's rings, that even all the way into D2, back when Titan was in the game, you could look up at the skybox and that ring was still stuck there. That hole in the ring was still there in the rings of Saturn. So I mean, like, to have that cutscene as like the first cutscene as your introduction to Destiny, is like, oh my god, this is a fucking awesome game. And then like even the only person that even seems to escape this, Uldren is like, he's screaming at the top of his lungs, and he's got his ship in full throttle as fast as he can to get away from this thing, and then it just kind of cuts to black, and then it's just Oryx, and like, yeah, suck it. And that cutscene is freaking awesome.
It is. It should still be out there on the YouTube somewhere. I'd highly recommend looking it up if you haven't had the opportunity to see it before. Maybe you weren't playing at the time, because it's great. And we're gonna end tonight on the lore card that describes that moment from Mara's point of view, and kind of tells a little bit about what her plan might have been, and what her motivations were during this time. So this is going to be Tyrannicide 5, and it goes like this. She closes her eyes. Oryx's throne world smashes through her fleet, the bubble of averted scream space pulverizing rock, metal, and flesh as mere matter surrenders to the will-made fact of the taken king. Somewhere, Aldrin roars defiance. This is the moment of absolute sacrifice, the incarnation of Awoken doom, to give up their lives in defense of the world they once abandoned. The sense of their great dying rips at Mara like a sob. She feels her Techians preparing emergency self-gates. Shiro-Chi reaches out to her, a wordless, urgent need for Mara to live, and it takes all the cold, impassive remove of Mara's millennia to turn that hand away. The shockwave strikes. Mara dies. In one way, she is vaporized with her catch, the bonds between the very particles of her body questioned by the harrowing logic of Oryx's weapon and found inessential. The mechanism of devastation is spontaneous fission. The author of the devastation is laughing in joy. In another way, a more true and symbolic way, she is impaled on Oryx's blade. She has thrown all her might at him, and he has answered. He has snuffed her fledgling divinity and her meager claim to royalty. He has exposed Mara to the raw and caustic hostility of his high war. She has been defeated by the sword logic. She dances down the blade and steps into his throne world. The harbingers give her the gate, and she takes the step. She is dead, consumed by Oryx. She is dead in his will, his ascendant realm. There was no other way inside except this true way. Inanna at least gave her people some warning. She told her minister to have her worshippers lament, drum, pray. Inanna told her minister to beg the gods to save her. Mara has not. Instead, she has enlisted Eris and several million mad dancing guardians to go knock off the god who killed her. It is, on that level, a very simple bank heist. Get yourself taken into the treasury as treasure, and when the owner dies, break back out with his stuff. But even Inanna had to send everyone away before she passed through the last door. Mara thinks of everything she has ever known, all the people she has lost, back even to the Yang Li Wei and that ray of light in deepest dark. She is there again, on the tether, falling into the mystery. Her brother is crying out after her, trying to follow, and she cannot look back. She has been thinking of a logic of her own, of secrets and hidden designs. The universe has not grown simpler in its age. Wherever life can begin, it has begun, and even in some places where sensible folk expect it should not. The great tendency has been towards intricacy, towards sophistication, towards deep thought and richer ways of being. A sword is everywhere edged, but the piece of a bomb did not look at all like weapons until they are assembled. Oryx's throne world tries to tear her body and psyche into a quintillion screaming pieces, but Mara has survived the inclement primordial chaos before space and time. She has retained her selfhood through far worse than this, and she has patience for eons. Eris will succeed. The Guardians will play their part. When the power in this world is free for the taking, Mara will take it. Not as the victor taking spoils, but as a scavenger takes a prize component for her masterwork. When a pawn reaches the far side of the chessboard, it may be promoted to a queen. And what hatches when you promote a queen? What new board does she claim her place on? Mara knows. She settles in for the long wait, entirely alone, almost at peace with it. And that is the end of that lore card.
So here we have a better explanation of what the weapon was. It's literally Oryx pushing out his throne world, his ascendant plane, like pushing that out into reality is just confusing the piss out of the laws of this universe. And like Mara says, her atoms were deemed irrelevant and just done away with. So yeah, like it, and she uses that as her way into his throne world. Like she knows that she can't just go walk into his throne world. We eventually get a way into his throne world by way of Eris Morn and becoming Ascendant and all that other stuff. But at this point in time, Mara is just trying to find a way to get in there. And like she even says at the end of this, Eris will succeed. The Guardians will play their part. She knows that Eris is going to taunt the Guardians into going after the Taken King. She knows that Eris is going to get the Guardians to go after this big bad baddie of the universe, because at this time we had taken down Atheon, we had taken down Crota, we had taken down Skolas. I mean, we as the Guardians at this point in time are pretty powerful. I mean, we're borderline God Slayers at this point, and Eris knows that we can become God Slayers. We can go kill a god. We can go kill Oryx, and that is like Mara's ultimate goal. Is once the king is dead, once the owner of this giant treasury is dead, I'm just gonna grab all of his shit and leave, and just basically walk out the front door.
Yep. Say Mara is gambling on the fact that she knows she cannot defeat Oryx on her own. And so she is allowed her material form to be destroyed, and her, for lack of a better term, soul is now residing in Oryx's throne world, just waiting on the gamble that we, the Guardians, will be powerful enough to kill Oryx, and that she can then make off with whatever bits of his power she needs to complete her plan. And she talks at the end here about, when a pawn reaches the far side of the chessboard, it's promoted to a queen. What happens when a queen is promoted? What new board does she claim her piece on? And I think Mara knows. I think Mara is saying that you claim your place on the board of divinity at that point.
Yeah.
That she is using this as a pathway to true godhood.
Bold move, Cotton. Let's see if it plays out for her next time. Well, yeah. So I guess we'll end it there then. What do we got for shoutouts?
Yeah, so that's where we're gonna end the readings for tonight. And say we're gonna do before we get to shoutouts, I want to do a little PSA. Next week's episode is going to be delayed by likely just by a day. So for those listening, we will be recording on Tuesday, so it'll come out on Wednesday. That'll be Wednesday the 3rd, I believe. Yeah. So but yeah, just minor delay on the next episode release. So we do have a couple shout outs that we want to go through at the end of the night here. Let's say we had a couple new reviews on Apple Podcasts, but nothing with text to read. But thank you still for leaving those 5 stars. Those are always helpful. And say nothing new on Audible either, but again, we appreciate those that have left reviews there. So most of our shout outs are coming to us from Twitter this time around. Say the first of which comes to us from one just simply titled Joe. who says, "You guys keep me from going insane at work." That's good to hear.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we can be of service, because depending on your 9 to 5, they can be awful.
Mental health is important, and we support it.
Yes.
We will continue to help support your mental health by bringing you lovely stories of the reef, of kings and queens and death.
Yeah, real light and fluffy topics. Totally. Yeah. Not genocide or sacrificing your people for godhood or any of that.
It's it's fine. Everything's fine. It's all fine.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yes, thank you for enjoying us enough to, I guess, listen to us during work.
Just don't get in trouble.
Yeah. Next one comes to us from Brian, who says, "Absolutely love your podcast. Your theory crafting is amazing as well. Keep up the great work." Thank you. Thank you very much.
All the theory crafting is myth. Every once in a while, every 10th episode, I get one good one in, but the other 9, it's just myth. Like, I'll say something and myth is like, "No, what about this?" And I'm just like, "Fick, what about that? You're right. Damn it." And then I go back to my cave. But thank you anyway.
You come up with plenty, and I could not come up with mine if I did not have someone to bounce ideas off of.
That's true. Takes 2 to tango.
Absolutely. So we've got 2 here that are related, from a user Whiskey, who says, "Started listening a week ago with part 1 of the Awoken history, and I'm already caught up. Opened an entirely new side of the game that made me fall back in love with it. Thank you for providing such amazing content. Mara Sov is now one of my favorite characters in all of fiction. The Awoken are absolutely awesome. I appreciate the hard work and effort you put into the podcast. I will be listening every week now."
Well, awesome.
So, first, thank you very much. I say I'm glad that you've been enjoying the Awoken stuff. It's for me at least, and I think for Zora as well, my favorite as far as like the in-game kind of groups or races. I find them the most interesting to kind of follow along with. And to hear that we were able in some small way to bring some more enjoyment for you to the game via the lore, it means a lot, just because that personally happened for me as well. Where I played for a long time, kind of knowing some of the lore and some of the backstory, and then I started really getting into what people's, what the motivations of the characters were and the different races and why people were doing the things they were doing. And that just made me enjoy things 10 times more. So I'm glad we could do that for you.
Yeah. I think for me, we've had the most interaction with the Awoken, or at least I feel that way. I don't know if that's true or not. Well, at least up until recently, recently we've had a lot of interactions with Keitel and the Cabal and Savathun and all of that. But I think up until recently, a lot of our big go-tos were the Awoken, and the entire Forsaken expansion for D2 was a huge almost a reset for the game, realistically, because we're talking a whole new loot scheme came, we went back to random rolls instead of static rolls, a whole new story came, it was this refresh of the game, which brought a ton of people back to it, and then dropped all this lore on top of it to explain what the hell happened 3 years before, and then even before then. So I mean, yeah, I definitely think that the lore, for me, not just the Awoken lore, but just all the lore for the entire game, especially if it's something that explains a place or a thing or why we're doing a thing, like the rift generator thing, or the blind well. Like I love seeing that. I love seeing an explanation, storytelling wise, as to why I am doing a thing, and that level of storytelling has been more integrated into the gameplay, such as like going through dungeons and going through raids and stuff like that. You're getting stories told to you as you're going through these things, and I love that. I love that Destiny is doing that more. Like, I'm not going to say that will someday make our podcast irrelevant, because they still come out with lore tabs on gear and guns and lore entries. So please keep doing that, Bungie, so we don't go out of content.
Well, I don't think they're ever gonna make deep lore dives irrelevant. I think what they've been doing a very good job of lately, and I hope they continue, is that the story that is on the surface, that is at the forefront of the events happening in game, is much more accessible, is much more understandable, because we're seeing it play out in front of us.
Yeah.
Not having to go through and read and try and piece things together. But they still have those kind of deeper lore connections that you can still do that with. Good example being this whole season, and even last season, with Keitel and the Cabal and Callus.
Yeah.
And you can understand the main motivations going on there from the different characters, but you don't really get a sense for what Callus has done and what he has, like what Callus feels he has lost and what Keitel feels she has lost from their relationship, without doing a little more diving in. Like,
Sure.
the surface level stuff is fine and is a really good story, but there's so much more, there's so much more meat to it if you really like want to dive into those cards. And I like that approach.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. Well, again, thank you for your kind words. Which user was that?
That was Whiskey.
Thank you, Whiskey.
I say one last one here. This is coming to us from the PC Gamer Twilight yet again. It mentioned that the last episode we had talked about Siva and if we thought it would return. And they're hoping it does, because apparently they really enjoyed Wrath of the Machine.
I have some thoughts on this.
I'm of the opinion there's no way Siva does not return at some point. I don't know if it'll be next season, but I think if it's not, it will be the season immediately after.
Full-on prediction for me, next season is Siva and Rasputin, and we're getting Wrath of the Machine back. Everyone in every community is convinced that we are getting Taken King back, that it makes the most sense. And in my mind, it doesn't. It doesn't make sense for Taken King to ever come back. As cool and as fun as King's Fall was, we killed Oryx. That was his throne world. His throne world was tied to the Dreadnought. We killed the Taken King in his throne world. He is dead. I think Siva makes the most sense, because Siva, obviously Rasputin trying to get rebuilt. Anna's trying to put him back into an exo and all that stuff. We even called Anna at the end of the Witch Queen, or at the end of the Exotic Glaive quest, and was like, hey, what about this secret settlement? And she was like, yeah, I even checked Rasputin's repository. It's not there. There's nothing even mentioned. The only one that could wipe that would be Rasputin himself. So there's something there that blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I full on thing. And like what Myth predicted for the current season was that with Solar, we're going to get something Cabal related and something Callus related. And Myth hit that one on the nose. And so I'm following my instincts here and saying that because of Rasputin being this, electronic entity, this AI, this war mine, that kind of ties in with arc and electricity. And so that's kind of my logic. Arc is for sure, like that's the last subclass we have to get 3.0'd, and that's going to happen next season. We already know that's a fact. To me, that says Siva Rasputin next season. Let's see here. Where's it going to take place? Where would it take place?
As far as the season itself,
Yeah, we haven't come up with a location.
I mean, if it's Siva based, the Plague Lands.
Oh, we might get the Plague Lands back. Ooh.
Yeah, get the Plague Lands back. Because, I mean, we have the Cosmodrome. It would just be attaching the Plague Lands to the Cosmodrome map.
That's true.
I
mean, you did the whole prediction with this season with the moon. Like I cannot believe how spot on you were with all your predictions for the current season.
The other most likely spot, if it's Siva related, would be Mars. Now that Mars is back,
sure.
Reinvestigating Rasputin's original home, for lack of a better term, and the Braytech facility there and whatnot. I could see it go in that direction too.
Would we possibly have anything on Europa? Is there any?
I would love if that were the case
because of the Bray connection, right? Like that would be the other connection,
right? Something tells me probably not. Unfortunately,
I don't think so either. I like the idea of the Plague Land thing or Mars.
Yeah, I would love for it to be Europa. But I don't think they're gonna bring back. I guess the Cosmodrome isn't really a new location, but I don't feel like they're gonna want to tell people to go back to Europa for another season where I feel like most of Europa is kind of explored at this point.
Sure.
Underutilized in some areas, absolutely, but it wouldn't feel like you're discovering new things, really.
Right.
Unless they just did something crazy with it.
Like the Leviathan itself coming back being an explorable space. Like that we're able to go explore it as a new space with all the egregore on it, all the darkness stuff, the nightmares, all that stuff. So I think like as far as like a new space, I think you're right. Plague Lands to me seems like the Plague Lands or Mars, one of the two seems the most viable. And if it's gonna be Rasputin related, Mars obviously is the go-to for that. If it's gonna be and the whole thing with Mars coming back is like it has like tears in itself in its timeline where it's like parts of Mars is remembering the way Mars used to be before the collapse. And so I'm curious if there's like parts of Mars that remembers what it used to be when the AI Warmind thought that it was God and that it's the greatest thing ever.
There could be some really cool things they do with that, where maybe have big sections of the map, and as you're like going through the Braytech facilities, depending on you walk through a door and you're in the past version of that room, and then you walk through the other door and you're in the present version, or maybe there's multiple different past versions that you could go through. Like they could do some really cool stuff with that concept.
Awesome. I'm all about time travel. Back to the Future is the greatest trilogy in the history of trilogies. Time travel is awesome. I would love that. Thank you, PC Gamer. PC Gamer? Is that who it was?
Yep, PC Gamer Twilight.
PC Gamer Twilight. Thank you.
So, needless to say, I think Siva is happening. Whether it be sooner or later, we'll see. But it's definitely happening. And we don't have to wait long to know, because this Thursday, as of the recording of this, they will be announcing in the TWAB what the next raid is. So that will tell us all we need to know.
I'm telling you, Wrath of the Machine. Like the other part that makes sense to me for Wrath is that it was the least played and visited raid in all of Destiny 1. Like it came out, and then like 6 months later, they're like, Destiny 2, boom! And so everyone's like, oh, well, screw this game, I'm going to Destiny 2. I think it's Wrath. I think it's Siva. I think it's Rasputin. All right, I'm done. Sorry, I'm a little passionate right now.
Time will tell.
Yes, time will tell. Oh, I see what you did there, like a whole time traveling thing. All right, well, I guess I got to give a thank you. Let's see here. Who have I? Oh, I've got a perfect thank you. Thank you to the 3 greatest tech witches in the history of tech witches. That being Callie, Shirochi, and Sadia. You're the best.
Even if we almost kind of try and kill you a couple times.
Hey, it's fine. It's fine. The only way we can heal people is with our guns because we don't have fingers.
Guardians only heal with bullets and grenades.
Exactly. Oh, we can heal with grenades now too, can't we? You should only be
And
guns
bullets if
now.
you're using Lumina.
Yeah, now we can do both. There you go. Well, then from all of us lore nerds to all of you Guardians out there, we'll see you next week.